I forgot to mention Jocelyn DeFries and Dee Tranny Bear, who were also on the trip. A really close knit group of trans and non binary folk who all have major platforms and who all, you know, are connected to this conversation. And that damn comedy special was a black cloud over Mexico for a minute for us, unfortunately.
I can imagine that because it's what I mean. Let's just call a spade a spade. Every queer person I know was talking about this special. I honestly think that more queer people have watched it. I think there are probably more people watching it who don't agree with his ideology than there are
Then
people
who
who
did?
agree. Like it is, I mean, at this point, his fan base is the same as Lil Nas X. Like it's like exclusively queer people watching this special. Which, by the way, we at some point we need to talk about this insane thing that Lil Boosie said. Jacob, can you remind me to talk about this Lil Boosie thing later on? It's actually really wild. But anyway, um, and as I was listening to it. I did an interview for Deadline, and I was like, well, I don't want to go into this because I hadn't watched it yet, and I was visiting family in Columbus, Georgia, and as I was listening to it on my drive, I didn't watch it. I was actually listening and driving,
To the
and
special?
I was listening to the special, yeah, and I was like, it is. I don't know the timestamps and the percentages, but he talks about queer people. I'm gonna say minimum 40% of the special.
Oh yeah, yeah. Queer and trans folks, LGBTQ folks in general, and then trans folks in specifically, is something like 27 minutes. It's over 15 minutes. Let's just put it that way. It's
Yeah.
over. It's an hour long special, right?
And he talks about some really weird stuff. At one point, he like really
Goes in.
proudly brags about beating up this woman in a nightclub.
Yeah,
Like he's like, I beat this bitch. I was like, and I remember like listening and like everyone's like cheering and screaming. I was like, oh my
it is
god.
really.
I don't
It's
know if the story's true, but it even if it's not, it's just such a weird thing to like brag about like beating up this lady in this nightclub. And then he also goes into like he does this thing where he talks about queer people as if he's not talking about any black people.
right. Well, the one of the things that's really tough, just going back to like even mentioning that joke where the punchline was this, with how you beat up the one, that was the punchline of the joke. Um, is that it harkens for me. It reminds me of the reaction to the whole Chris Brown Rihanna thing, where it was like obviously there was a strong reaction to the Chris Brown Rihanna thing when he beat her up and she was in the hospital with black eyes and stuff.
Hmm.
But then the reaction from people online who I believe were women who were fans of Chris Brown's saying you can just beat me up anytime and all that stuff. That reminds me of that, like the cheering on of like Dave Chappelle beating up a woman who's I mean, essentially at worst you can say she's heckling him, and I guess if you're going to stand up and heckle a comic,
Well,
you
to be clear, what the story was there was Dave Chappelle was dancing with this. I'm pretty sure he was dancing with one lady, and then this woman was someone's girlfriend, and then the woman he beat up was a lesbian that he thought was a
in the
man.
bar. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so this I think this lady was like, "Hey, don't dance with my girlfriend," and then Dave
And he
Chappelle was
thought she
like,
was a dude. He joked about, oh, that's a man.
"Yeah." But then he realized that she was a woman, but he beat her up anyway because I don't know. I can't remember the
But that
whole.
was the punchline. And so that reaction from people in the audience screaming and hollering and laughing, it reminds me of that whole like, you can beat me up too, Chris Brown. Like that, just like that instant reaction of approval, like, yeah. And then some of the, obviously not to go so dark with it, but some of the reaction from people that I think were black women online, not just black women, but specific. It was shocking to see women who were could have been R. Kelly's victims in any
Yeah.
other situation, just showing unabashed support for him. And I don't know if that's because, yes, we know that what he did was wrong, but we don't care because we like him, or yes, we want him to beat up women because he should be able to beat up women, or is it, yes, I'm talking about Dave Chappelle, or
Yeah.
is it, yes, you know, we love him so much he could do no wrong, he probably didn't beat her up.
I
So,
think it
like,
is
I don't know which one it is.
someone made this really good point a while back. I can't remember who it was or what I was watching. It might have been Surviving R. Kelly that I saw this on. And someone in that special, if you haven't seen Surviving R. Kelly, I really recommend this. It's a great docu-series.
Yeah, there's 2 parts
Um
to it too. I think there might be
I
three
think it's like
parts.
more. I think it's like 4 parts or six
Yeah,
parts. Yeah. Anyway,
I watched the first
so
three.
what happened was at one point someone was like, if you say that you have a problem with R. Kelly and his behavior, then everything in your life that has a memory attached to R. Kelly is now tainted. So, Step in the Name of Love that you did at your wedding is now tainted. When you sang I Believe I Can Fly at your school's choir, that's now tainted. When you had your first dance to blah blah blah, all that is now tainted because it is attached to this person. And Dave Chappelle I would say that Dave Chappelle is a very funny person who's really good at making people laugh. He's good at creating conversations and getting people to talk about things, specifically race and queerness have been things that he's been getting people to talk about for years and years now. He was mostly race back in the day, but now he's really centering a lot of his conversations around queer people. And um we think about his show, we think about Half Baked, we think about Nutty Professor, we think about all of his comedy specials, we think about the times we laugh with our friends, and if Dave Chappelle is now problematic, or if Dave
And
Chappelle's
so are
content
we.
is now problematic, then everything we did enjoying all that stuff is now tainted and we're problematic too. That is a loose theory that I have. But I
That's
think there might be
fair.
some legs to it. You know what I mean?
There's definitely something to talk about there, and Dave was able to expose and take advantage of, exploit because exploit meaning making money off of,
Yeah.
uh, the vulnerability that we in the LGBTQ community, that has existed in the LGBTQ plus community for a long time, that I think we only really started meaningfully and effectively communicating about, uh last year in 2020, which is racism and the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
And there
Wait,
were
just wait one
certainly,
second,
we
Jacob. I think
talked
that
about
something
it.
happened with Pep's live stream on her YouTube.
Oh, it just came back on.
Oh, got it. All right, fierce.
Am I
All right,
still, I mean, I just got a notification. Is everything
yeah,
okay?
it's back. Oh, it just split into two. Got it. It's fine though. We're back.
And we're
Um,
back.
and
And
we're
so
back. Yeah.
anyway, so Dave exploited a weakness in the LGBTQ plus community that we weren't really guarding that door or addressing until last
I
year,
gotta hear back.
which was racism in the LGBTQ plus community. Obviously it's always existed, racism, and you and I kind of, we in an interview that we did together during Nubia, and talking about the drag race fandom and racism in the drag race fandom, we came to the same conclusion that obviously racism exists anywhere that there are people.
Yeah, the queer community is
You
a
know,
microcosm of the real world. So
right,
everything
yeah.
that happens in the real world will happen in the queer world. Hello,
And so
somebody.
we didn't, but by the same token, one of the things that was shocking is that I think we were looking the other way, because while we were talking about, gay marriage and AIDS and HIV education and prevention, we weren't necessarily talking about the issues of race within the LGBTQ plus community, at least
Yeah,
not to the same effect.
I
And
agree.
there were way more uh white gay cis men coming out last year during the BLM protests complaining about why they couldn't do Pride. But they wanted to go to a Pride party, but they were pissed that Black folks were marching. There was way more of that than I was prepared to see, you know,
Yeah, shook,
and
shock, and shattered, girl. Been like,
I
oh,
was shook, shocked, and shattered. And that's the vulnerability that Dave Chappelle exploited, during his special,
well,
is
Dave Chappelle
racism
is
within
really
the
good at.
community.
He's really good at drawing false. What do you call it?
Conclude
False equivalencies.
equivalencies.
Yeah. So, like for example, he did this thing a while back. I'll never forget this. I remember being like it's like he'll trick you into thinking that what he said actually made sense, but then you step back, you're like, that didn't make sense. He did this thing where he goes, I'm gonna just this is a warning to everyone. I'm about to use some very salacious language. It is, I'm just trying to quote this joke that he
Trigger
told, or this,
warning, please do
yeah,
not take a clip of this and take it out of context, y'all,
yeah.
because we will ignore
So
it.
so Dave Chappelle was on his show talk back when he had the Dave Chappelle show, which I was a huge fan of, and I still get a big tickle out of the show.
I never
It's a
had
really good show.
Showtime.
It's
Wasn't
very
it
funny.
Showtime?
I think it was Comedy Central. I think, I don't remember. I think it's
Oh,
Comedy
okay. I
Central.
didn't have that
Anyway,
either.
so Dave Chappelle would say the N word a lot. He say nigger a lot on this show, like a lot on this show. And one time he wanted to say faggot, and then someone from like standards and practices called him and was like, "Hey, you can't say faggot on this show. I'm so sorry, but you just can't say that." And then he was like, "Okay," but then turned around, he's like, "Wait, I want to know why I can say nigger with impunity, but I can't say faggot." And then she looked at him and she was like, "Well, because you're not gay." Keyword, she said, "Because you're not gay." And then he was like, "Yeah, but I'm also not a nigger." And I'm like, "Okay, what you did was you what would have made more sense is if you said, 'Yeah, but I'm not black, but you are black.'" So he tried to make it seem like she was saying only niggers can say nigger and only faggots can say faggot. But I think what she was saying was gay people say faggot and black people
Black
say nigger,
people
and
say, yeah.
but he did, but he made this joke and it got this huge reaction, and everyone was like, "Yep, yep, see, see." And I was like, "But Mary, you didn't nail that. Like you really tricked people into thinking that you just dropped some knowledge when in fact you didn't."
That's what he
And
does.
he did it with this
And
special, and the way that he ended
he
it, that the last thing he said was, and I want to say, "Stop punching down on my community." And I was like, "Who is he talking to? Like, who is he talking to?" When he, do you remember that? That was like the last thing he
of
said.
course I remember
"Stop
that.
punching down on my community."
He is talking. This is the thing. Let's just call it what it is. Dave Chappelle uses the language and uses the idea that he is a poor black man, in these scenarios,
Well, to be fair, he
and
does walk
in
out and say, "I'm very rich and famous" in his defense.
no, but that's what he's aligning himself with, and he's not
Yeah,
talking about, like, for instance, in this special, when he talks about being a black man in this white bar, and basically he describes this bar and this town as this sort of Trumpian, white bar, white town that's, folks, he decided to move to this town and
yeah,
purchase land and purchase a house in this town, open his businesses in this town. He has people that he connects himself with, who I guess calls his friends, but people in his personal circle who are all the white people of that town. He is pretty intertwined in that town, and as from what I hear, because I do know some people from that town who say that that's not the picture that he painted about this town is not the truth. He basically threw that whole town under the bus,
yeah,
and so you're right. He does draw these false equivalencies, and his whole the whole set of jokes that he has that are deemed transphobic are really predicated in not having knowledge about the trans community, period. People not
at
knowing about the
all.
trans
Yeah,
community. That's the only way that he can be successful with these jokes. You know, the fact that he aligned him, the fact that he could turn around and say, I'm team turf, but then turn around and say, turfs don't hate trans women. They're just saying gender is a fact. And that's what J.K. Rowling said. So I'm team turf. And he went that whole circle and didn't really even, and then said, but I believe that a trans woman is a woman, to basically take teeth out of anyone who says trans women are women, stop being transphobic. But the truth is, you can't be team turf, and that's, like, the whole argument of turfs is the notion that trans women are men is central to the turf's
yeah.
entire argument.
It's their
And so if you're
ideology.
team turf, then you can't say that you believe that trans women are women. Those two things just don't make sense. And if the audience knew that that's what, if he had said turfs are trans exclusionary radical feminists who believe that all trans women are just men, and then he said I'm team turf, then he could never say, I believe trans women are women. But he didn't do that. He said, TERFs are just people who think that, gender is real. And no one is he said gender is a fact. No one is saying that gender isn't a fact. First of all, that's not even what J.K. Rowling says. J.K. Rowling
Exactly.
says
Yeah.
sex is real,
But he never has
and
all the information. He just comes in
he
like
never
he
has all
does
the
and
information.
just
And
acts like he has it all.
well, that's the thing that's so tough is that people in his audience are people who are that I've seen online defending him have said that they are grateful that he's having this conversation and that he is not being mean or transphobic. He's thinking about this rationally. He has all the facts and he's presenting them to everyone. And if you just look at the plain facts, then it is what it is. And the way that he deduces it is real. And
Yeah.
everyone else is delusional and sort of overreacting. You know,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's really good at creating those like false equivalency things that seem like they make sense, but then if you just step back and really think about it, it really just does not track. It doesn't
it
scan. It
doesn't
doesn't go
track.
across the
You
board.
can't even connect them.
Yeah, I think the honestly the oddest thing that he did that I was really kind of like, oh my god, was this attempt to absolve himself of
Using yeah.
transphobia by using a like an anecdotal um um interaction he had with this one trans woman who he went into, like, her name was Daphne. He went into like, I mean, like calling her a great friend, and like, I mean, he really acted like he and Daphne were like touring buddies. Like the way that he talked about like a great friend, like you would think that
And he
Daphne was
started this
like,
fund in her name, which makes it seem like that just puts the icing on the cake for the
yeah.
people who might have doubt.
But then he goes on about how Daphne's a fan of his. So it's also weird that he like really kind of sees the value of like queer and trans people and their validity based on whether or not they support him. And if you support him, then you're great, and if you don't, then you're not, or something. I mean, I'm reducing. That's very reductive. But then he like drops the bomb on the audience that she has again, this is a lot of trigger warnings this episode, y'all, that she has did her life, that she's taken her life. And then he like really absolved himself, being like, you know, she would laugh at these jokes without her being able to come forward and say anything. And he's like, she would love this. I have given her daughter a college fund, or a trust fund. I have done all, like, look at all these things that I did for this one particular trans
Person.
woman, this one person of a
Mhm.
trans experience. But he doesn't say what anything about the community at large. You know
Well,
what I
one of the
mean?
things that's really tough about that is that all of his stories, I mean, I don't really know because I was obviously not there, but being able to corroborate his stories as truth is really tough to do when you are talking to someone else that was there, who was
Yeah.
there at some of the experiences. I happen to know one of the people that he talks about in his special, and in terms of the town that he is from, and they say that none of that is true. None of that, the way that he describes the town, the way that he describes what happens in the town, that experience, that interaction with the trans woman in the bar from the town, who he says has a neck like Joe Rogan. She does not have a neck like Joe Rogan. She's very beautiful. You know, not
And
that
also
Joe
using
Rogan's
Joe
not
Rogan
beautiful,
with like Joe Rogan
but
also has a huge history of being really
yeah,
problematic with trans
being
people.
able invoking Joe Rogan does not do anything for your stance that you are sympathetic to transgender people. Period. First of
Yes.
all,
Yeah,
second of
he invokes
all,
J.K. Rowling, turfs,
and Joe
Joe
Rogan, yeah,
Rogan.
like that doesn't really do anything for that argument. But but moreover, it's not true. This person is, does does not look the way. It's unfortunate that Dave felt that he needed to lie about this person's appearance to paint the picture that this was essentially exactly what they say when they're putting forth the anti-trans legislation and bills, whether it's trans people in sports, trans people in the bathrooms, that trans people are just women I mean, men who dress like women, not even addressing that there are trans men and trans masculine non-binary people. But this is about trans women who say that they're women, but they're really just men. That's what the underlying impression is
Mhm.
in out of his stories, and that this man who's dressed like a woman comes up to him and is basically a man, so he's going to deal with them like they're a man. That's
And he
basically
yeah.
how this comes off.
And he also talks about like, I mean, he just really it really seems important to him to like to like talk about how trans looking people are. He did it with Daphne as well. He was like,
Hmm.
he was, I mean, he was in so many words being like, she looked very trans, you know. Um, and it was really interesting at the moment where he said that she screamed up, you know, I don't need you to understand me. I just need you to understand that I'm having a human experience. But it seems like he never really got the message.
Whether he did or not, what was worse that he went through and told the audience, again, I don't know if this is true or not, but in one story about this woman who has committed suicide or died by suicide, he goes this whole thing how great she is and how much she supports him. So he appreciates that he supports her and he gave her a chance. But in that middle of that whole story, he has to drop in that there's some predatory behavior of hers, that he calls her, and that he alludes that she was going in a different direction other than something professional. And I don't know if
Mhm.
that's true or not, but based on his other stories and accounts of other people, that other trans people and other people in his town, like the other people that he deals with, that he surrounds himself, which are mostly white people that he's talking about. And these
Mhm.
are the people that he chooses to have surrounding him in his life. People who work with him, people who work for him, people who he partners himself with, you know, all these types of things that he surrounds himself with are the white people that he is calling out their racism so adamantly. But I digress. We don't know that she was having predatory behavior or not. She may have tried to hit on him. Who knows? But what the thing that's a shame is, even in her death, dropping the seed that trans women are really there to just try to trick men into having sex with them. You know, that's
Yeah.
the connection that happens with me, that I get when he says it's a trans. He called a trans woman. He innocently called a trans woman to offer her a job, basically, and then she tried to basically, I guess, have phone sex with him
Suck
or
his
something like
dick.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
suck his dick, or yeah. I mean, really, is that she's dead?
But
Even
also
if
the thing
she
is
did,
like,
like,
if Dave Chappelle and Daphne had this rapport, they would like bounce back and forth, and there's nothing wrong with like, I have friends that me and my friends sometimes we make problematic jokes about each other, but it's also interesting because we're very close and we can
mhm.
bounce back and forth. Obviously, at this point, Daphne cannot defend herself, make jokes back. Daphne cannot come forward and be like, you blah 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 blah, and have a funny retort or anything, because it is a, I mean, talk about an uneven playing field. There's literally nothing the woman can do at this point because she's not with us anymore. So he just gets to say whatever he wants, accuse her of hitting on him. Uh, you know, he can say
He says he was an angel to
anything.
her. He's his whole testimony is, we have to just trust her whole testimony. And I mean, I guess that's not true because her family, he says her family, I haven't heard from her family, but he says her family supports him and they gave the thumbs up for everything. And so I don't really know to the extent of the involvement of the family or what they've actually had to
Yeah,
say, but it is problematic, I think, and it really just uses the same tools. The thing that's such a shame is there's a space to have a conversation, and if he wants to hold the conversation, uh you know I think it's worth noting that transgender people are heavily discriminated against, as are LGBTQ plus people, which includes black folks, and from within the community and outside the community, obviously. But we are dealing with, certainly right now in this moment, there's hundreds of bills and policies that are being put forward as bill that could soon be turned into law in several states in our country. A couple of them just passed last week in Texas here, and none of the impressions or none of the conclusions that people can draw, I don't believe so, really draw people to be more sympathetic to those things. In fact, it if you follow the logic, then that Dave leads us down, that trans people are still predators. They're men who dress as women, and they are, and they're racist. Period.
Yeah,
And that isn't doesn't draw
that was
you
a
to
big
want
part
to.
of it. That was a
Yeah.
big part of it was like really like driving home that like
Transgender
queer
people are
people
white
across the
and
board are really
racist.
racist. Yeah,
Yeah.
white and racist. Like that is like that was a through line throughout. Which
Hmm.
until you just said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. It was like a big part. He was like a black gay person would have never done that to me. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. Like I don't know that
I mean,
that's a
listen,
true
it is
statement.
complicated and nuanced, but it really isn't fair. I mean, I was waiting for him to acknowledge that black gay people existed, and he didn't necessarily even acknowledge that they do exist by saying a black gay person would not have done that. He didn't really talk about what black gay people or black queer people actually do. He just
Yeah,
said if there was a black gay person, they wouldn't do that, and it's so frustrating. So
it is. I want to discuss some of these things in the comments real quick. Someone in the comments is like,
tell us.
there's a big thing over on your YouTube. There's a discussion about whether or not Dave Chappelle. They're like, well, he doesn't care about. There's like a big thing like all he cares about is money. And then someone else is saying, I can't find the comment anymore. Someone's saying he doesn't care about money. He left $50 million when he was at his show. And I'm like, walking away from $50 million does sound like a really like a huge thing. But also someone who can walk away from $50 million, who can afford to walk away from $50 million, that is a whole different, the scenario changes when someone's like, I walked away 50 million, and you knew that you would be comfortable if you did. So it's not
You know
it's not
what?
like Dave Chappelle sacrificed the world by walking away from that show.
That's
Dave
right.
Chappelle was not going to walk away from that show
Even
and then end up living on
But
Skid
girl, that
Row.
was 20 years ago, right? And we're talking about 2021. Dave Chappelle got paid a lot of money to do all of these specials. If he didn't
Yes.
care about money, he would have done them for free. And I wasn't there, but it's really like it's very probable. It's very believable that before he even sat down to do any of those specials, because there was paperwork and contracts signed. He didn't just accidentally show up and there was an audience there. They arranged that. And so there was a contract
Imagine.
signed, right? And so someone authorized and negotiated that contract. He knew how much he was going to get paid for these specials before they did it. He must have. And so
Yeah, of course.
someone
They
must
just
have
surprise him.
yeah.
Surprise, 24 million.
Here's a
Surprise,
gift.
we
Take
love
it or
you.
leave it. Oh, I don't really
Yeah.
want it. No, I don't want it. Someone must have argued on his behalf or negotiated on his behalf on how much he was worth. And Netflix may have just offered him, we're going to triple. Dave, you just wanted to do it for $1? You don't care about money? Oh no, we're going to give you 120 million. Maybe
Yeah.
that happened, but it's more likely that someone from Dave Chappelle's team said, "We want more money than whatever you offered. No, we want 120 million, and let us tell you why." Because this man, when he speaks, millions of people listen. What he says is influential. The only reason people are going to get paid that kind of money to do a Netflix special or any kind of TV program is because they know that they will get the ratings, that people will tune in, and people will listen to what that person has to say. And so it's really irresponsible for anyone to say it's just a joke, it doesn't really matter, it's not influential, no big deal. Because the reason why Dave Chappelle walked away from his special and walked away from that money was because the people, what he says is that the people that were in charge were too comfortable laughing about black people and calling them niggers, right? On his
Mhm.
special. And he didn't want to have to go through that anymore. But this was his comedy. He was writing these jokes. By the way,
Exactly.
he had a white writer writing the jokes with him. And these are jokes that had been on his show the entire from day one of the Dave Chappelle show. And so if anybody couldn't take a Dave Chappelle joke, it was Dave
It's Dave
Chappelle.
Chappelle.
Right?
Yeah. He was in a prison of his own design.
Yeah.
He created a space where where it was okay to laugh at black
At
people,
black people. And
and
then he
then
got upset when people
they were
when
laughing
they
at
were
black
laughing at
people.
black people.
He was like, I cannot believe y'all are laughing at black people. I cannot believe you're laughing at this joke about a black blind man in the KKK that I
And
constructed.
And that's when he realized. I don't really know, but that's probably when he realized
But you suspect.
I need a new victim.
I mean, yeah, that was wild. I want to talk real quick about. Do you know about the Jacob? Can you do me a favor? Can you fly things on the screen? Is that possible? If not,
It's not something I can do in a timely
Just
fashion.
write it on a piece of paper and
we'll,
hold it
we'll,
up in front.
we'll try it out. So if you could just find a screen grab of Lil Boosie's tweet at Lil Nas X. So I don't know. So there's a rapper named Lil Boosie who has been saying, I mean,
How do you spell
be just type in Lil Nas X and Boosie, Bossie, I
that? I got
think.
it.
So
Mm-hmm.
Lil Boosie is one of those folks who just always says things about Lil Nas X being like, and then the first thing he tweeted that was really wild, he was like, at some point, Lil Nas, like, what is he doing next? He's gonna just turn around and suck one of his dancers' dicks on stage. This is crazy. And and then people were like, this guy's obsessed. That's the one, baby. That's the one right there.
Obsessed.
Scroll up. That's the one. People are like, this guy is obsessed with Lil Nas X. He lives in his brain rent free. So then Lil Nas X, who's kind of an internet troll, he likes to troll people on the internet. Lil Nas X went on his Instagram live, which gets like tens of thousands of people in each one, and he just says, "Hey y'all, I have a song coming out with Lil Boosie," and Lil
Look,
Boosie tweeted out the wildest. I mean,
mhm.
the wildest tweet.
When was
I
this?
It was incredibly recently. I cannot believe it's on the screen right now. I'm gonna read it to y'all. Stop trolling. I'm gonna stop trolling me. F word. LOL. You a whole bitch playing with a gangster. Shake my head. You can keep sucking dick and getting effed in the A in peace. And
But let me
hashtag you
watch.
hate yourself. If I would too if I was you. LOL. Nas X, if you
Wait, what would you do? He would keep sucking dick and get fucked in the ass if he was little Nas
yeah.
X?
Then he goes, if I would he goes, Lil Nas X, if you basically like in your life, you would do the world a huge favor. Nobody wants you here.
Wow.
Can you believe
I'm still
someone
stuck on if you should go suck dick, you can keep sucking dick and getting fucked in the ass in peace. I guess we shouldn't really be cursing. You
wait,
can
wait,
do
wait.
all this. It's too late now. You can keep doing all this stuff that that I think that you're doing in peace. Because if I was you, I would do it too.
What is his
What is going
obsession?
on?
Like this is an obsession. And this is it's really interesting because
It's an
like you have people like
unhealthy obsession.
Dave Chappelle, who's like kind of tipping around and trying to make it look like he's not, and Lil Boosie, who's just like, I
Leaning
don't
in.
like gay people. I hate them.
But it all
And
seems to come back to him and how he feels about anal sex. That's all it is. That's what it. I mean, that those are the examples. He constantly he. I don't really listen to Lil Boosie, but the only time I have only heard Lil Boosie speak publicly or tweet publicly or communicate and signal that he's alive a handful of times, and 100% of the time he's been talking about anal sex and sucking dick
yeah, or yeah, and
between
specifically,
men.
yeah, it is. He's his obsession is wild, and I feel like there's this weird thing now where like there's this Dr. Umarian like philosophy in the world, this like Hotepi philosophy that really seems to just be like really leaning into the notion of not liking queer people. And it is very I saw this video on TikTok today that like I remember being like, this is why it is this video of this woman who is calling her child's grandmother. I don't know if it's her I don't know if it's her mom or her or the other parent's mom, but she's yelling at her. I'm gonna play the video for you. It's wild. It says, My
Okay.
my pastor grandmother told me she's disowning me because I'm gay, and my mom went off. This is what it was on TikTok.
My pastor grandmother told me she's disowning me because I'm gay, and my mom went off. Y'all want the full video?
The one that I worked 60 or 70 hours to provide for. Not you, not your son, not nobody has provided for that one. That little red ass with a dick, that's me. Understand that. That's me. And if there was somebody coming for your kids, you will do the same thing I'm doing for mine. So don't ever think you're going to chastise my son and think his mama not going to call and check you, bitch. The fuck?
She said that to
So
her whole mom. I mean, to her
I don't know
own
if
mom.
I don't know if it's her mom or the other grandma. Basically, this grandma was like, "I'm disowning you," and the mom just snapped, and she called this woman up and just read her the fucking riot act. It was like, "Listen, you dirty, dusty, crusty old bitch! Don't you ever come for my fucking son again." And part of me is like, that's kind of the allyship I'm looking for these days. There was like a while back when a friend of mine from high school just put on Facebook, I think that gay guys should have to change in a different locker room. And the way my mom went into the comments and was like, Daryl, don't you ever come to my fucking, oh, I just said his name. Oh my God.
Oh my
Anyway,
God.
he posted on Facebook, so obviously he stands by his thoughts. But she was like, if you can, don't ever come to my house again. Don't let me catch you on my street again. Don't speak to me. Block me right now on the internet. It's a wrap. And I feel like that's also the kind of ally that I want to be.
That
And
is.
whenever I see Dave Chappelle egregiously attacking the queer and especially the specifically the trans community, I want to be the kind of person who comes online and says my, I mean, I'm a little less aggressive. I'm gonna whoop you. I don't really do all that, but I do want to, say my piece and be like, I think that this is incredibly problematic. I think that it contributes to violence against trans people, specifically, and the erasure of Black trans people. Like this, like it seems like he's working toward like making sure that when you say trans, when you say queer, when
You
you say
only think
gay,
of Caitlyn
you
Jenner.
only think of white people. That's the only thing you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
trying to use anecdotal experiences with one or two queer people to absolve
Anecdotal
yourself.
experiences and then pulling lingo and using it, applying it incorrectly, pulling popular lingo that everyone understands or has heard, and then using that as proof that he is knowledgeable about the community because he's using all this vocabulary that we've heard before, but a lot of people don't really understand what it is, and then he uses it and applies a lot of it incorrectly, in
Yeah.
terms of the definitions and all those things. And then he's home free with his check. And unfortunately, lots of queer people have watched this special to understand what he's talking about. And then, you know,
Oh my God, Pep. I'm sorry. I'm looking at these comments and
what
like
is the
every.
comments?
I know how when you and I do a thing and then becomes like a viral thing, and now everyone's going to be talking about my high school friend Daryl. All the
Oh,
comments on
damn
your
it. You
YouTube are
pulled
like,
a damn Nicki Minaj.
everyone's like, Daryl, oh shit,
Let's look him up.
it's a rap on Daryl. Oh my God, this is so ridiculous. Well, honestly, Daryl said what he said, so
It is what it is. Sorry, Daryl. Oh, we should have taped it. Not gonna lie.
there's also lots of people. Okay, last thing I mean, I
What
don't,
are they
I know
saying
you
to
have,
him?
I know you have a thing to go to, but like, how do you feel about that thing where like someone comes into one of these spaces? I see a lot of it in the comments here, where they say stuff like, "I'm gay and I loved it." Like,
Listen, I think there's, let's be real. Let's just lay this out here. It was a comedy special. There are things that people can find to laugh at, and some people can say something's funny. The notion that a joke can exist and be funny to one person and not funny to somebody else is very normal. That happens
yeah,
all the time. When we're talking, there are lots of jokes about everything. Some jokes are about food. Some jokes are about this. When jokes are about culture and race and people's identity, sexuality, things that they can't control, or at least things that they say they can't control, things that they were potentially born into, whether you believe it or not, things that are facts about that person. When the jokes are about those things, they can get just as many laughs, but a lot of times those laughs are from people outside of those groups. The people from within those groups are generally have a different reaction. It doesn't necessarily negate or validate the funniness of it. if someone within that group thinks it's funny or says they think it's funny. When a joke is about you, you may have a different reaction. That's what we can at least all agree that when the joke's on you, you may have a different reaction. Now
Yeah.
let's just leave it there, and then also acknowledge that there are bills, HB 57, I think, in Texas just passed. This is a law, a bill that's moving into law. I think it was signed by the governor that aims to limit access to transgender healthcare and transgender people in sports. These are real life things. There have been so many news articles and stories, whether you're in the trans community or not. There have been so many reports and news articles and stories, not enough, if you ask me, that have reported in the past 6 years, or longer, that the XYZ government, whether it's a city, a state, or federal or local government, has limited access to transgender people, made it so that transgender people can't do this. The big question that everybody asks that constantly comes up in the news is, should trans people be able to use the bathroom? Should trans people be able to be in the military? Should we allow trans people in sports? Should we, all these things are threats to the happiness and existence of a certain group of people. There might be, just because one transgender person might be like, I don't trust doctors and I don't need health care anyway, doesn't mean you should say, well, then we got the go ahead. We don't need
Yeah.
to allow transgender people to have health care. What is that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Just because Candace Owens says
Oh,
whatever
God.
she has to
Oh,
say
God.
does not mean that that Black lives don't matter. Right? And so just because you're gay and you like this special, good for you, Mary. Good for you. If it's so innocuous and you can withstand that special, then please go ahead and volunteer for the trans community. Spend some of your time actually lobbying and working to fight the legislation that's being passed in several states. You can fly your ass to Texas, fly your ass to Alabama. Do it, please, because we would love some real thick-skinned gay people who are willing to
Right?
march on our behalf. So if you're ready to go and you can really stand the transphobia, then you can join the fight.
And people are really
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting real worked up.
it makes it, and the way that people are coming to bat for like if you think about the things you're defending here, one is Dave Chappelle's right to make problematic jokes, and then like the lives and the health and the safety of a vulnerable demographic. Why are you so interested in defending Dave Chappelle's right to make
Yeah,
where do your
why? That's what I'm saying.
and also there's something that was very telling. Something Dave Chappelle did was very telling, or something that happened about it tells about the environment he created. So in his special, at one point he mentions a bathroom bill in one of the Carolinas, and someone in the audience goes, "Whoa!" But that person felt comfortable doing that
Enough to be like,
because
woo, we love
they
it.
were like, we're on the same page. Dave Chappelle.
They thought they were in safe space.
And Dave Chappelle was like, wait. Dave Chappelle had to actually go, wait, no, I don't agree with that. But Dave Chappelle created a space, just like what he did with his nigger jokes, where people feel comfortable expressing problematic views. And then he was like, wait, whoa. That's
too far.
That's not what I meant. Yeah. Anyway, girl, I mean,
we're gonna have to wait and see what happens, because we're gonna have to wait and see what happens, because I know that he is apparently behind the scenes open to having conversations with trans individuals, and hopefully that will result in something good. But it is a perfect time for people who are really supportive of, whether you're supportive of this conversation or whether you are offended by the special or whatever stance you have. I would implore you to please learn something more about the trans community, the LGBTQ community, but right now the transgender community specifically is under attack by law in many legislatures around the country. Do something to help with that. Volunteer, call governors, call legislators, call Congress, tell them to pass the Equality Act at least. Educate yourself on the laws on and what people are saying in those laws, and then you can then hopefully you will understand and be able to see the correlation that many trans activists are making between hate speech and how it trickles its way and seeps its way into the legislation, because these senators and these Congress people and people in local city and state governments are actually using the words that people say online,
Yep.
people like Dave Chappelle,
As talking
and they're
points.
writing laws about whether or not we should have certain rights. That's happening. So please do your best to do some research and then find a way to support. Give some money. Since Dave Chappelle doesn't need the money, give some money to the queer community, to the
Yeah.
trans community, to Black trans folks. Go down and volunteer for a homeless shelter that services LGBTQ folks. Go down into a Black homeless shelter that services LGBTQ folks.
Support
Do
trans
whatever
people,
you can
support trans
to help the
artists,
community.
you know?
Mhm.
And something I will say too, like there's a lot of conversation in the chat being like, well, whether or not it's funny. We're not critiquing whether or not Dave Chappelle's, but humor is subjective. So this is not like we're not trying to like we're not trashing his jokes or deciding whether obviously someone thought his jokes were funny. There were people in the room laughing.
Yeah.
Humor is subjective. This is not whether or not the jokes are funny. That is not the point of this conversation. What the conversation, because obviously everyone knows problematic jokes can be funny. Everyone has laughed at a problematic joke at some point in their life. Everyone has. What
Mhm.
we're discussing is, are the jokes problematic? Are they detrimental? Do they cause harm? Do they incite violence? That is what we're saying.
That is the question. And if you can't bring yourself to understand that question, then at least ask the question, is there a joke that you can remember from your childhood that you thought was funny, that you, if you hear it today, you realize is no longer funny because of what you now know, because you are now more educated, you now have more experience, and you now understand that that joke wasn't funny, although you found it funny, and yes, you were really laughing when you were younger or before you knew that thing. And has that ever happened to you? It must have. As we
Yeah,
grow
for
and we
sure.
learn, there are jokes. I'm not asking you. I'm just rhetorically
Oh,
asking the people in the comments. As you grow and you learn, you realize that there are jokes that you no longer find funny because you have more information, and that's the point. Get more information, and then you may understand why some people may not find that funny, and you also might understand that there's a bigger conversation that's more life and death here.
yeah. Well, Pep, I love you so much.
I love you. I know this wasn't like the ball of laughs video that we normally do, but I didn't think it would be because we needed to have this conversation. So I
Yeah, for
appreciate
sure.
you, having it with me.
Well, I love you very much. And these
Well,
videos
I
will be
love
staying
you.
up on our pages. It's on Peppermint's YouTube page. It is on my Facebook page. Go to Facebook, type in Papa Drag Queen, and go to YouTube and type in Peppermint, Miss Peppermint. And you can find these conversations. They'll be here for a while. If you want to send it to a friend, if you have a family member who you want to engage in conversation, but you don't know how to do it, send them the link.
Send the link,
What's not clicking,
darling.
Steven? What's not clicking, Steven? All right. Bye, everyone. Y'all